President Donald Trump was shot today during a rally in Pennsylvania in a move that could end Joe Biden's campaign for president. After all, Donald Trump is the indisputable victim in this tragic event, and people will feel sympathetic for the former president. President Trump had already built a healthy lead over President Biden, according to 538's polling averages even before the attempted assassination. Now that Trump has been attempted to be assassinated, his numbers will likely skyrocket because of the increasing number of people that will feel distasted by the Democratic Party due to this event. So how will this be reflected on the 2024 presidential election? In today's video, we'll fill in this Electoral College Map and find out. In Trump's safe states, being the states of Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, the Dakotas, Montana, Nebraska's at large, the 1st, 3rd districts, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, Missouri, as well as the states of South Carolina, Alaska, Iowa, and Ohio, 4 states that Trump did not win by safe margins back in 2020, that I anticipate he will win by in 2024, in part thanks to his alleged assassination attempt. Now for Joe Biden, his safe states will include the states of Washington, California, Hawaii, the District of Columbia, Maryland, Delaware, Connecticut, Vermont, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, as well as the state of Illinois and Maine's 1st Congressional District. Most notably, I left out the states of Oregon, New York, and New Jersey because I believe those states will be under 12%. Now going to the likely states for Donald Trump. Starting off here with the state of Florida, I think this will be a likely state for Donald Trump. This is now his home state, a state he won by 3.3% back in 2020, a state where he made major improvements with the Hispanic vote, especially in Miami-Dade County, a county I expect could vote for Donald Trump in 2024. Additionally, some of these rural areas, some of these more elderly parts of the state, have actually trended towards Trump, despite the fact that the election was more favorable for Joe Biden generally in 2020. So I'm going to give the state right now to Donald Trump by a likely margin. Similarly, another likely state for Donald Trump is the state of Texas. If you just look at the state of Texas here, you go to my polling error spreadsheet. In the state of Texas, Trump has a 8.6% lead according to polling. And based on the historic error in many of these states, Trump could win by 11.6%. That's comparable to Romney's win in 2012 and McCain's win in 2008, which are generally deemed to be quite impressive Republican victories in the state of Texas. Now, Trump only won the state by 5.6, but all indications suggest that he'll continuously improve in this Hispanic Rio Grande Valley part of the state and the rural areas. And based on what had happened today with the assassination attempt, I definitely believe that some of these suburbs will not trend towards Joe Biden like we previously anticipated, and as a result, I believe Trump will probably win the state by double digits at this point, so the state of Texas is likely for Donald Trump. Now going to Maine's 2nd district here, I actually will put this as safe because, again, if you look at the polling error spreadsheet, the current polling has it at R plus 13. If the polls were as wrong as they were in 2020, Trump would win the district by 23.2. Now, I don't think that's going to be the type of dominating margin Trump wins the district by, but I think a safe margin is certainly plausible. We go to the state of North Carolina, again another likely state for Donald Trump. This is because he won the state by a lean margin back in 2020, and I don't think that Trump will do any worse in any states that he has already won, and I think that Trump will improve by substantial margins in some of the rural areas of the state, especially the rural black populated area right here, borderlining the state of Virginia, as well as some of the rural white areas down here. I do believe that Trump will make improvements essentially throughout the board in the United States, contributing to a likely margin for Donald Trump in the state of North Carolina. Now for Joe Biden, Oregon, New York, and New Jersey are obviously his likely states. That is not very surprising. That puts Trump at 235, Joe Biden at 181. Additionally, I do have Colorado here in the likely Joe Biden column. Biden won the state by 13.5. Of course, some of the margins are going to narrow after Trump, I think, will do a bit better in now Lauren Boebert's new district, as well as Lauren Boebert's old district here, where she nearly lost to Adam Frisch. I believe that Trump will do better in the rural areas, but I also believe that Biden might actually do slightly better again due to the population growth in Denver, but still the state of Colorado likely for Joe Biden. So that pretty much wraps it up here for the likely states for both parties. Now going to some of the swing states here. First off, in the state of Nevada. Nevada is a state where Democrats have a pretty bad shot of winning in 2024, despite the fact that Biden won the popular vote by 4.5 points, more than 2 points better than Hillary Clinton. Joe Biden did not improve in the state of Nevada. Furthermore, if you look at the governor elections in that state in 2022, the only Democratic governorship that the Democrats lost, held by a Democratic incumbent, was Steve Sisolak in the state of Nevada. What we're essentially seeing is that Democrats have been doing worse and worse in the state over the past several decades. And I do believe at this point in time, the Republican Party is favored, also because of polling. Trump has a 5.7% lead in the state of Nevada, and that was before this assassination attempt had happened in this aggregate. Joe Biden has not led in a single poll in this aggregate, and essentially even a modest polling error in favor of Biden will not be enough for him to win the state. Right now, I have it as lean for the Republican Party, but this could even go to a likely victory. Now going to the state of Arizona, a state that Democrats did quite well in the 2020 election, a state that Democrats flipped in the first time since Bill Clinton won the state in 1996. However, again, polling has been pretty bad for the Democratic Party consistently. Joe Biden is right now below 38% in the state of Arizona, and Joe Biden has an 8% deficit against Donald Trump, which is significantly outside the margin of error. Again, what we're seeing is a significant lead for Donald Trump, especially in the more recent polls. Morning Consult came up with a poll that showed Democrats winning in Wisconsin, winning in Michigan, winning in Pennsylvania, that showed Trump down by 7 in the state of Arizona. So I really think that it is difficult for Democrats to win the state. Again, things can change. The growing population in Phoenix will probably help the Democrats and their chances to win the state, but at this point, I don't believe it is enough. Democrats have a very little room for error. Just over 10,000 votes separated Joe Biden and Donald Trump in Arizona. And I think that Democratic lead has all but collapsed over the past 4 years. So the state of Arizona right now lean for Donald Trump. Now going to New Mexico. New Mexico is really not on the map for a Republican win, but it is a state that has become more competitive. Although we did see that Joe Biden did quite well in Bernalillo County, where Albuquerque is, and as well as around Santa Fe, what we did see is pretty substantial Republican increases in some of the rural areas of the state. And if you want to go to the state of New Mexico here, Michelle Lujan Grisham only won her governor's race against Mark Ronchetti by about 6 points, which again is still a win nonetheless in a semi-Republican wave here. But again, that race was more competitive than what some people may have anticipated from safe blue New Mexico. Now, polling has been not that many in the state. We don't have an abundance of polling, which suggests that potentially that the state is not really as in play as some may have expected, as the polls are taking the state as a very serious swing state. But nevertheless, here right at this point, I'm still going to put it in the lean Democratic column, which could be considered in play, though I believe that Joe Biden will win the state of New Mexico because a 10% deficit is very hard to overcome in 4 years. Now going to the state of Georgia, where Democrats have had brutal polling in this election cycle. In the state of Georgia here, polls show a 4.3% lead for Trump over President Biden. Now you might think that is a pretty close and competitive race, compared to at least the states of Nevada and the states of Arizona. However, polling error in the state has been very minimal over the past couple of elections. If you go to the state of Georgia here, you'll see that the historical error in 2016, the polls favored Hillary Clinton by 1.4. 2020 polls favored Donald Trump by Joe Biden by 1.0. What we're seeing here is the state is historically very accurate in polling, and polls in Georgia have not been off for a very long time. Raphael Warnock was predicted to win by about 2 points. He won by 2 points. Herschel Walker lost by 2 in that race. Brian Kemp was expected to win by 7 to 8, and he won by 7 to 8. So the state of Georgia has very accurate polling, and what we're also seeing is substantial dissatisfaction with the Democratic Party. A lot of black voters are disaffected with Democrats, think Biden has done nothing in the past 4 years, and as a result, many people are reluctant to vote. And at this point, if turnout is down in Atlanta, there's no way for Democrats to make up the substantial deficit they've got to face in some of the rural parts of the state. And I do believe Georgia right now is in the lean Republican column, though it could go to likely. Now going to the state of Minnesota. a state that voted for Joe Biden by 7 points in 2020, largely thanks to Democratic overperformances around the Minneapolis area. However, if you were to look at the fact that, again, Biden and Trump are in a very close race according to polling, in fact, Trump at one point overtook Biden in the Minnesota polling aggregate, and the fact that there was a very high uncommitted number in the state of Minnesota back in around the 2024 Democratic primaries, you could see some trouble going towards Joe Biden's direction. Now, nevertheless, here the state is still extremely competitive. Right now, I have Joe Biden narrowly winning the state just because of the fact that a 7-point deficit is hard to overcome in 4 years. But nevertheless, here we could certainly see a very competitive race, a razor-thin race in the state of Minnesota, just like the 2008 Senate race in the state of Minnesota between Al Franken and the Republican incumbent. Now going to the next race here, the state of Virginia, a state that should have been a no-brainer for Joe Biden. At one point, Biden was leading the state by 12. Now a razor-thin race, a state that Trump got within 0.1% of overtaking Biden at one point during the polling aggregate. Now what we're seeing in the state of Virginia is a lot of ties in the polling, which is again a good news for Trump considering he lost the state to Biden by 10 points back in 2020. We have saw a Republican win the state. Glenn Youngkin won the state in the 2021 governor's race in the state of Virginia. Now, Virginia would be competitive if Republicans are able to narrow down some of the margins in the more suburban areas of the state. Now, I do believe still that Biden is favored in the state of Virginia, probably by close to about a 5-1 to 10-1 margin, but nevertheless here Virginia could be more competitive in the election. Now going to the next state here, the state of Wisconsin. What we see in Wisconsin is about a 2.3% lead for Donald Trump. Historically, Wisconsin has significantly underestimated Donald Trump, as he was underestimated in 2016 by 6.7 points, and in 2020 election by 7.8 points. Ultimately, though, this lead is relatively consistent with what I expect the final result to be in the state of Wisconsin. Joe Biden won the state by just 0.63%, and a lot of Democrats have migrated from areas like Madison County or Milwaukee County down to the Sun Belt. Democrats have a very narrow margin to lose in the state of Wisconsin, and I believe it's more than likely that they will lose that 0.63% lead they had back in 2020. So ultimately, though, the state of Wisconsin, a lean state for Trump, especially after the assassination attempt. Now going to the state of Michigan. Michigan is a state where it is razor thin again in the polling between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. However, Trump pretty much held a consistent lead over Biden for the entirety of the polling election cycle since November of 2023. Now, of course, the most recent poll does have Biden up by 6, but that is certainly an anomaly and an outlier, something that is not expected to be kept for the rest of the election cycle. So the state of Michigan here, we also saw a high uncommitted Democratic movement in the state of Michigan, where more than 100,000 voters had voted uncommitted over Joe Biden in the Democratic primary. For context, Biden won the state by 155,000 votes, and a lot of that uncommitted movement has to do with the war around Israel and Hamas, where again Joe Biden is more supportive of Israel, but many young voters and Arab Americans definitely support Hamas over or rather Palestine over Israel, and therefore that is a problem that Biden has to face. If Democratic turnout is significantly down in Wayne County as well as Washtenaw County, then Biden is in trouble. Now, right now, the state of Michigan, because of the assassination attempt, because how poorly Biden's doing in the polling, and because how poorly Biden did in the debate, the state of Michigan right now is certainly advantaged to Donald Trump. Now going to the state of Pennsylvania. Trump's rise in support after the assassination attempt is most likely to be felt in the state of Pennsylvania. After all, Trump's attempted assassination happened in Butler County, which is about 35 miles north of Allegheny County, home to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Additionally, what we see is that there's a lot of Democratic disaffected voters in the state of Pennsylvania, which is why Philadelphia County shifted 3.5% over to the Republican Party back in 2020. What we also are going to see in this election is the fact that there's a lot more Republican registrations across the state. Republicans have registered about 500,000 more Republicans since the 2022 midterms in the state of Pennsylvania. Furthermore, what we see is that Trump has a 4% lead in the state, And essentially, that is quite a big lead for Donald Trump. He's nearly at 50% head to head, and that's going to be very difficult for Biden to overcome. Ultimately, I do have Pennsylvania here going to the lean Republican column, putting Trump now at 312 Electoral College votes. I'm just getting Nebraska second out of the way to hope for Joe Biden, a Omaha-based district that has heavily trended away from the Republican Party, especially during the Trump era. Now going to the state of New Hampshire, a state that was not really even in play for Joe Biden. For Donald Trump in this election, a state that Joe Biden was assumed to have won, is now a state that is extremely competitive, a state that Trump has a 0.9% lead over Joe Biden in the state of New Hampshire. What we're seeing again is the fact that Trump had a consistent deficit against Biden in polling, in some cases by double digits, but the more recent polls, especially after the debate, shows Donald Trump in a very competitive race against President Biden. Now I want a bit more data before I give the state to Donald Trump, because of the fact that there's a lot of college-educated voters in the state, but right now I'm only going to give it to Joe Biden by a tilt margin. Finally, the state of Maine, a state I consider the fact that voters generally overlook the state as a competitive state. After all, Joe Biden's only ahead by 2.2%, and the fact is right now, when we look at this the 2020 election map, the state is extremely rural. Rural states have generally heavily shifted towards Donald Trump, and the state of Maine is no exception. Mitt Romney in 2012 only carried one county in the state of Maine, while Trump carried about half the counties in the state. Now, only time will tell. Right now, again, just like New Hampshire, I want a bit more data before I give the state to Donald Trump. Right now, Joe Biden still has a tilt margin of victory in the state of Maine, which again puts Biden at 226 Electoral College votes to Trump at 312. Trump could be approaching a landslide if he is able to flip some of the tilt and lean states, such as New Mexico, Virginia, Minnesota, Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District, and Maine's at-large vote. Thank you for watching today's video. If you want just one takeaway, is the fact that this assassination attempt will greatly benefit Donald Trump's chances of winning a second non-consecutive term. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Goodbye.